Nigel Taylor. I think that in the introductory remarks, Mr. Skelly hit the nail on the head when he spoke about growing the economy. If we can successfully grow the economy, then the other things look after themselves and everybody's wish list can be dealt with. So I'd like to hear from everybody on the panel your two best ideas as to how you're going to grow the economy in the next 5 years and expand the tax-paying base of the island.
Thank you for that question. To be quite frank, I don't believe it's a politician's position to actually come up and provide the next best thing, because that was always the challenge. And what we need to do as a government is provide what I would call the economic ecosystem. And what we have been doing is listening to industry here on the Isle of Man, businesses that are got opportunities to grow in new emerging markets as well as established markets. And what we've tried to do is to provide the legislation. That's the first thing a politician does, is makes legislation. And we introduce legislation to support business so they can actually grow. But the other points that we've been listening to very, very recently, and you've heard, is funding has been a big problem. Since the banking crisis, the banks have been very risk averse. We've had numerous businesses say they want to grow their business, they want to come to the Isle of Man, but they can't get banking. Funding is a problem. That is the very reason why, and I'm glad to say Tynwald supported the introduction of an enterprise development scheme. And that's a fund, a massive scheme financially, 50 million for the next 5 years, to be invested only in businesses that are going to be based here with a physical presence and actually employ people. Because that's what we rely on in terms of taxation, is secondary taxation through employment. So the fund is very important. Legislation is the other point that is really very important that we can provide. And that's what we need to do politically, and the government needs to do, to allow business to come up with the next idea and see if they can be successful, because if they're successful, we're successful, and that actually helps us balance the book and look after the vulnerable.
I'm afraid I'm going to question your question. We've had 30 plus years of growth, we are told, and if everything's fine, then I'm likely to go home now. So I think the first point to make is, it doesn't really matter how much growth you have if you're not taking the proportion that is needed to support the quality of life which we expect. Now, again, for me, the problem comes back to you're not being asked. We have a very high standard of living on the Isle of Man, and it was created off the back of money that we didn't actually have any entitlement to. And now that money is gone, and we haven't replaced it. So further growth, I'm not sure, is the answer on its own. Now, the second part of the answer is, everybody who's got their eye on global trends will tell you that productivity, human productivity, is going to decline. So we have an economy that's largely heavily dependent on service industries. Those are all going to decline. So how do we replace that? Now, the future, people who are more clued up on these things and look at them, people will tell you that the future is in ideas and innovation. Now, I differ slightly with the Economic Development Fund, because I think any good idea, any innovative person who has a good idea won't struggle to find funding. I've had that experience in my own business, and my business isn't that great. If you've got somebody who's got an idea and who's got the drive to make it happen, funding will find them. Now, the key is those people. So again, it comes back to, and I know Mark has mentioned this in his manifesto, it's those people. They are the key. But it's not a mass of people, in my opinion. So we have to question what that growth actually means, because I say we've all been told that we've had 30 years of fantastic growth. And if that's the answer, why hasn't it solved the problems that we've got now? Why have we got crumbling public services that are struggling to finance, if that is the solution? And the other problem is, of course, if you're going to have that growth, where are you going to put it? And again, this comes back to funding of infrastructure. So if we don't fund the infrastructure, and it all costs money to sustain that growth, we're going to end up all, there's not a lot of space left here. So, there needs to be a much broader debate as to how we actually make this happen. And I'd say one of my key concerns is that we are heavily relying on service sectors, which are going to decline. By anybody who is paying any attention to the trajectories on these things, service sectors are going to decline as technology replaces them. So the key is in the ideas and the technology which creates those, which creates that transformation. So that's how I would answer the question.
Okay, thank you for the question. It's a very good question. Now, I'd like to take things back a little bit. James has touched on something which I think is very important. There's been constant crying out loud about how wonderful the economy is doing because we've had 31 years of unbroken economic growth. Now, I bet you could all predict I was going to say that because that's what Mr. Bell has been trotting out for I don't know how long. But that's not the whole picture. Economic growth in its own right is not the whole picture. We need to be looking at what we're doing with that economic growth. Now, I've mentioned in my manifesto, under economy, so we need an innovative economy with a national strategy for cohesion, but we also need to be looking at things like the Cantrell self-anchoring striving scale, which will actually allow us to measure our well-being. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how do you feel you are right now? How do you feel you'll be in 5 years' time or 10 years' time? And when I'm talking about how you feel you are, I'm talking about, do you feel we have adequate policing? Do you feel the healthcare is adequate? Do you feel we're actually doing what we should with our economic growth, such as it is? Now don't get me wrong, economic growth is good. It's always good. But what type of growth have we got? There's also the Gini coefficient as well. Another one that I've mentioned, which is designed to measure and represent the income distribution of a nation's residents. Now I'll point out, we have a widening wealth gap on this island. Let's just think about that for a moment. A widening wealth gap. So yes, we do need economic growth, but we also need to diversify the economy. It's not just growth, we need to diversify as well. As James says, services are going to go away over time. They are. We're getting more mechanised. Artificial intelligence is coming in. Robotics are coming in. That was an argument for basic income off that, but that's one for another question or another time. But I'd just like to highlight that this whole thing about GDP, there's too much emphasis on that. So I'm going to bring things back to an earlier comment that I made. We need to reform our budget first and foremost. We can't actually afford the 50 million Enterprise Development Fund unless we've got the money. We're already dipping into reserves. Now we've just added another 10 million a year we've got to find. Now don't get me wrong, I actually think the EDF is a good idea in principle. I really do. But we must have the money. So if we change the budget process, remember what I said, we start again at zero, we can save between 50 million and 130 million every year just from changing the way we do things. We do that, we can ring-fence services, which is very, very important, and we can also have that growth cert that you would like us to have, and we can diversify our economy. Thank you.
Well, I do think there's no clear idea as a situation that we're in presently. A lot of answers to these sort of questions really come out of history. If you look back, what do we do? We've done tourism very well in the past, in fact, phenomenally well. So we have an infrastructure sort of set up for that, even though it has diminished. I've seen this obviously in the manifestos. We talk about if we attract an off-peak, we have certainly Russian hotels not at full capacity, or boarding houses or holiday homes. So just by in the off-peak season, we do well in the TT and the Grand Prix. But in the bits outside that, that's not really happening. So we have all this sort of natural resources for it. I mean, it's attracted people forever, really, that come here and have been amazed at what they see. So we're not really obviously solving that, and by no clear idea, I think that very much plays into that. It's not particularly difficult. It's based upon a number of certain things, good travel links. Then when they come here, a lot of facilities already in place. So if we increase by 500 visitors at, say, £500 spent, you can do the maths per week, that's 250,000 straight into the economy. So in addition, what other things do? We have flexible legal systems. So flexible legal systems means that we can we can provide possibilities for businesses to be able to do things that, I suppose, with less regulation or in different circumstances than they would in other ones. Now, obviously, the tax has become a moral issue, and we don't do that. But there's lots of possibilities in biomedicine and in particularly data storage. So that can sort of grow, and that's using our flexible legal system. We can then go further. The one I love the most is the Purity Act, of course, and we have a thriving beer industry on the island, which is, but that then goes further into agriculture, and we can expand this. So obviously we're promoting that, but we can do an awful lot better. Indigenous industry is agriculture. If people are coming to the island, they want to be able to, they're coming somewhere unique and special, and we must, I hope we must never, there's one of the most key things we must never lose, because it is very different here, and that's characteristic. So they come here and they have products that are made here, food that's made here, cheese that's made here, beer that's made here, and this can expand. So this feeds, and also feeds into our self-reliance, which goes further. So it can also then, I found, was an interesting sort of use of our sort of legal system. A lot of companies, we know that an awful lot of companies on the island operate, international, so sort of mega companies. Okay. It's my manifesto.
One thing I'll certainly agree with the other candidates is that gross domestic product, gross national products are not good measures of economic success, but well-paid jobs are, and that's what the government's policy has been to try and attract. And then, of course, you diversify your economy to make sure that there's no great reliance on any one industry and the risk is spread. I think the main thing I would say would be to make sure that we don't kill the goose that laid the golden egg. What we are renowned for, and what people come here for the fact that we're nimble in legislation. We have 0-10 tax regime for companies who are fiscally neutral to bring the top quality jobs in. Even down at local level, things such as 5% VAT for the home improvements. It's about providing that business environment. It's about ensuring that quality of life. They're the things that bring business here. They're the things that bring the higher level intellectual capital and the well-paid jobs to the Isle of Man. That's where we need to focus our efforts. And that would include things such as, I know it might be controversial, but to actually exempt work permits for those who are higher earners. We want to make it easy for those who are going to come here and contribute. I'm not saying that we'd abolish the work permit system, but I'm saying that for those who have a lot to contribute here, we could do more. And certainly what we're seeing with the e-gaming industry is bringing in an awful lot of different skill sets, from marketing, from IT and programming. Bringing these skills together, they're having other spin-off effects as well. So we're getting secondary and tertiary effects from having these sorts of industries here. And again, it's encouraging that clustering of intellectual capital that's really going to be the key to future success. And certainly when I was in DED, things such as pensions freedom, that's again, it's a legislative tool to give more freedom to individuals, to allow them to put that money into the economy. These are the sorts of things that we have been doing, and another one would be the pensioners' bond that's trailed for next year, to allow locals to invest in the government so that they can invest in the future of infrastructure and developing the economy on the Isle of Man. So these are things that are yet to come, but have been quite widely trailed in I think this year's budget.